Scriptures in the 21st Century, Part 5. Having entitled today's Devar Deep Dive, it's because I want to take a comprehensive look at the significance of the people groups that developed over the time following the dispersion from the Tower of Babel. Last week, I looked at the genealogical list in Bereshit, Genesis chapter 10, where we found the names of all the 70 men who were engaged in the building of the Tower of Babel. That was followed by the genealogical development of the descendants of Shem, down to and including Avraham, whom later Yahweh renamed as Avraham. It was not until chapter 12 that Avraham was called to go to the land of Canaan, where Yahweh gave him the following covenantal promise in Bereshit chapter 15 verse 18. I have given this land to your descendants from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the territory of the Keni, the Kenizi, the Kadumini, the Hitti, the Prizi, the Rephaim, the Amori, the Canaani, the Gehazi, and the Yevuzi. Now all this may seem unimportant, but as I showed last week, Yahweh made two covenantal promises with Avraham. The first one, in Bereshit 15, verse 18, included the whole territory between the Wadi of Egypt and the Euphrates River. It's a vast area, including both the Sinai and the Arabian peninsulas, where, of course, the sons of Canaan, along with others, took up residence after the Tower of Babel. The territory covered by that first covenantal promise was given before Avraham had a son. So Avraham replied to Yahweh, Yahweh God, what good will your gift be to me if I continue childless? Eliezer from Damascus, my servant, will inherit my possessions. Later, Avraham did produce his firstborn son, Ishmael, through the Egyptian slave girl, Hagar. Hence, as the promise had been made to Avraham, assuming that the territory would become the rightful possession of the descendants of Ishmael, but remember, Hagar was a descendant of Noah's son Ham. She was not part of the line of Shem, nor was her family lineage the same as that of Avraham. So later, a second covenantal promise was made in chapter 17, verse 1 to 8, where Yahweh appeared to Avraham, making him the promise through the name of El Shaddai, meaning God Almighty. It was during that encounter as El Shaddai, in verses 4 and 5, that Yahweh made the following declaration. As for me, this is my covenant with you. For you will be the father of many nations. Your name will no longer be Avram, exalted father, but your name will be Avraham, father of many, because I have made you the father of many nations. El Shaddai, whom we now know as Yahweh, made his second covenantal promise regarding the land of inheritance by saying in verses 7 and 8, I am establishing my covenant between me and you, along with your descendants after you, generation after generation, as an everlasting covenant. I will be a God to you and your descendants after you. I will give you and your descendants after you the land in which you are now foreigners, all the land of Canaan as a permanent possession. The second covenantal promise turned the tide of history forever. Up until that point, it would have been the descendants of Ishmael who were going to inherit all the territory from the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates River. However, through that second covenant, Yahweh, as El Shaddai, spoke specifically about the land of Canaan, which is now known, of course, as Eretz Israel. Hence, that second covenant was ratified by the shedding of human blood in the form of circumcision. The ratification of that second covenant through circumcision set it apart from the first covenant, which of course was made through the shedding of blood of animals and birds. Hence, that second land covenant was more than just a covenantal promise made to Avraham. It was an actual covenant made through Avraham, through the shedding of his own blood. The first land covenant was made between God and Satan as they walked through the cut animal parts as a smoking firepot and a flaming torch in Bereshit chapter 15 verse 17. That covenant ensured that from that time onward the rightful inheritance of the region from the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates River would forever be the sole possession of the descendants of Avraham. However, at that time of that covenant being ratified through the circumcision, Yitzchak had not yet been born. But El Shaddai, Yahweh, reappeared and confirmed the earlier promise about the future inheritance of that land of Canaan, saying in Bereshit 17 verses 15 and 16, God said to Avraham, as for Sarah your wife, you are not to call her Sarai. Her name is to be Sarah, and I will bless her. Moreover, I will give you a son through her. Truly, I will bless her. She will be the mother of many nations. Kings of people will come from her. Then verse 19, Sarah, your wife, will bear a son, and you are to call him Yitzchak. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. But then Avraham reflected on the first covenantal promise and must have wondered what was going to become of his firstborn son Ishmael. In response, Yahweh said in verses 20 through 22, I heard you. I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful and give him many descendants. He will be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant through Yitzchak, whom Sarah will bear at this time next year. With that, God finished speaking with Avraham and went away from him. So the die was cast. Yahweh, speaking as El Shaddai, had set forth who would be his rightful future inheritors of the territory defined in those two covenants. Regarding the land of Canaan, Yahweh, or El Shaddai, kept reiterating that he did not want any of the descendants of Abraham to intermarry with a person of the descendants of Canaan. In reality, Yahweh wanted the people of Canaan to fade away, but Satan had other ideas, so Canaan continued to grow. It must be remembered that it was Canaan himself, the grandson of Noach, upon whom Noach had placed his curse. Therefore, as Yahweh had considered Noach as being righteous, it would have been totally inappropriate for any of Abraham's family to intermarry with the people of Canaan. In each subsequent generation, that same message was reiterated by Yahweh. As we see in Bereshit 24 verses 3 and 4, Abraham said to his servant, I want you to swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven, the God of earth, that you will not choose a wife for my son among the women of the Canaanite, among whom I am living. But you are to go to my homeland, to my kinsmen, and choose a wife for my son Yitzchak. In the next generation, Bereshit 28, verses 6 through 9, Esau saw Yitzchak had blessed Yaakov and sent him away to Padan Aram. He said to him, you are not to choose a Canaanite woman as a wife. And Yaakov had listened to his father and mother and had gone to Padan Aram. In response, Esau, having already married a Canaanite woman, saw that the Canaanite women did not please Yitzchak, his father. So he, Esau, went to Ishmael and took, in addition to his wives he already had, Machpelah to be his wife. Even Yosef, the favored 11th son of Yaakov, had been sold into slavery in Egypt, and yet he still found favor in the sight of Yahweh, even though he had married an Egyptian woman. Even Yaakov later selected Joseph's two half-Egyptian sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to stand alongside Yaakov's sons as two of the future tribes of Israel. That act is proof that Yahweh recognized Noach's curse was confined to Canaan alone. The fact that Ephraim and Manasseh carried the genes of both Shem and Ham did not seem to be a problem in the eyes of Yahweh. Now, jumping forward to Shemot, Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 to 24, we find there that after speaking the 10 words to Israel from the top of Mount Horeb, Yahweh again reminded Moshe how Israel were to deal with the Canaanite when Israel entered the land of promise, when he said, "I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him, listen to what he says, and do not rebel against him, because he will not forgive any wrongdoing of yours, since my name resides in him. But if you listen to what he says and are doing everything he tells you, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. When my angel goes ahead of you and brings you into the land of the Amori, the Hittite, the Perizi, the Canaanite, the Hivi, and the Yevuzi, I will make an end to them. You are not to worship their gods, serve them, or follow their practices. Rather, you are to demolish them completely and smash their standing stones to pieces." So we see, all the way through their time in Eretz Israel, Yahweh honored the curse that Noah had placed upon his grandson Canaan. There was never to be any relationship between Israel and the descendants of Canaan. Before moving on, I need to clarify why God referred to himself as El Shaddai and also Yahweh throughout the book of Bereshit. It must be remembered that the whole book was actually written by Moshe at some undisclosed time after he'd been given the 10 words at Mount Horeb. Therefore, as Yahweh said in Shemot chapter 6, verses 3 to 5, "I appeared to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as El Shaddai. I did not make myself known to them by Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. Also, with them I established my covenant to give them the land of Canaan, the land where you wandered about and lived as a foreigner. Moreover, I have heard the groanings of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians are keeping in slavery. I have remembered my covenant with Avraham." So having established how Yahweh wanted Israel to deal with the people of Canaan after entering Eretz Israel, I now want to focus my attention on the modern day situation that is playing out in the Middle East, and more particularly in modern Israel. Firstly, from what we have considered both today and in previous episodes, it is blatantly clear that Yahweh has never wanted his people to have a coexistent relationship with any of the descendants of Canaan. So who are the descendants of Canaan in this modern era? Many suggestions have been put forward over recent decades, but most scholars agree now that the people who are still causing most of the problems within the borders of modern state of Israel, the so-called Palestinians, who claim territorial rights to large portions of Judea and Samaria. If they are descended from Canaan, Is there any documentary evidence to that effect? Yes. Yasser Arafat claimed both verbally and in writing that they are descendants of the Canaanites, and particularly from the tribe called Jebusites, who were known in biblical Hebrew as the Yavusi, who we now know from the geological list of Bereshit chapter 10 was the third son of Canaan. And turning to Wikipedia, we find a detailed statement, which I've paraphrased for the sake of brevity. A 2020 study on human genetics history of the Middle East during the Middle Bronze Age, that is circa 2100 to 1550 BCE, relates to the period between Avraham and Moshe. Researchers have found in Palestine, Israel, that the Palestinians, along with the Levantine groups, were found to be derived from 81 to 87% of their ancestry in the Bronze Age as being related to the Canaanites. Now further, in 2021, a study of the New York Genome Center also found that the predominant component of the DNA of the modern Palestinians matches the Bronze Age Palestinian Canaanites who lived around 2500 to 1700 BCE. Another commentary on the same question can be found in the Middle Eastern Forum Quarterly, Volume 14, the summer edition in 2007, which asks the question, how significant then is the Palestinian Jebusite link? The connections between the modern Palestinians and the ancient Jebusites legitimize the Palestinian claim to Jerusalem and Israel. The political and diplomatic impacts are clear, especially as Palestinian leaders insist that Israel forfeit sovereignty over Jerusalem particularly. Less clear are the religious implications not only for Jews but also evangelical Christians who believe in the Old Testament promises of God to the nation of Israel. End of quote. The Old Testament promise to the nation of Israel are now the very core of the current Middle Eastern crisis. Therefore, all Christians should ask themselves the question, do we acknowledge and believe in the covenants of Scripture and the promises made by Yahweh to Avraham or not? What about the church institutions of Christendom? Where do they stand on the matter? Are they standing with the God of Israel and supporting the rights of Israel as the inheritors of the land of Canaan, as promised by Yahweh, or are they siding with the Palestinians' claim that they have rightful ownership to the territory? During a global conference held in South Africa on the 10th of May 2024, the World Council of Churches Program Director of Public Witness and Service shared reflections on the role of the WCC in fostering what they call just peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. There he referred to a statement made earlier seeking justice and peace for all in the Middle East. The news coverage went like this. The Central Committee also expresses profound regret that so many apparently insurmountable objects have been in place in a way of the long-standing commitment and desire for us to make a two-state solution in accordance with international resolutions and established by the WCC policy. The press release ended with the words, the WCC will continue to support that vision which promotes just and peaceful coexistence consistent with international law. In summary, the worldwide body of the WCC, World Council of Churches, is embracing international law ahead of the covenants made by the God of Israel. That is the type of world view that Israel is confronting, not only from the woke movements of the American left, but also from theological bodies like WCC, an institution that claims to be built upon the teachings of the Holy Bible. So in conclusion, this devar has been the first part of a two-part deep dive into the reasons behind the current Middle Eastern crisis. So as Talmudim of Yeshua, we must ask ourselves the question, where do we stand at this point in time? Are we standing in support of the covenants made with Avraham in relation to Israel, or are we standing for a two-state solution within his chosen territory? Next week, I want to consider in more detail what lies ahead for the political and religious institutions that place higher value on the international rule of law than upon the scriptural message and the historical covenants Yahweh made. Yahweh is extremely jealous over his city Zion. By making his choice, he will never allow any human or celestial being to wrest it away from his grip. So, in the not too distant future, all those who stand in opposition to God's sovereign plan will be brought to account for their actions. So I will ask again, as Talmudim of Yeshua, where do we stand in this current worldwide politico-religious tug of war? Are we with Yahweh or international law? The choice is ours. Shabbat Shalom.